out there to the hobby, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. It was a very big weekend for not just Heritage Auctions, but the hobby in general as our Winter Platinum Night auction closed. It was an amazing sale with some incredible results. And today we're going to talk about some of those results, what they mean for the industry, some trends that we're seeing. And I'm joined today by the most luminous of luminaries in the hobby, Mr. Joe Orlando, who mandates that I say that before every time.
Right. I'm following the footsteps of Jolt and Joe. Every time I'm announced, I need to announce my presence with authority.
We just need to get you some more nicknames, just like DiMaggio. He had plenty, and we haven't come up with one yet. But if anybody has any questions or comments, a nickname for Joe would be a great one.
Yeah.
And also joining us, our consignment director, Jason Simonds. Jason, thanks for making time.
Thank you.
I'm just kidding. Joe made him do it, so he didn't really have a choice in the matter. So a really exciting sale. Let's start right at the top with what everyone's talking about, the 1979 OPC sealed case. There it is, sold for $3,720,000. A beautiful cardboard box. Jason, you were instrumental in bringing this in. Why don't you give us a little backstory on it?
Yeah, so our consignor is out of Regina, Canada, and if you're wondering where that is, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in Saskatchewan. This was from the collection of a really old school collector. He was one of those guys who was buying up boxes and cases back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, into the 80s. And this was just a case that he never got around to opening. He had bought 2 cases from a distributor, and he opened one and built several sets, some of which we actually have in-house right now that we're going through and grading cards out of. But this case here was put in a back room with every intention of getting to it later to open it, and he let it sit and forgot about it. So his son has been helping him clear out the house, and as he's going through all these boxes, he stumbles on this case, and he texted me saying, "Hey, Jason, I think I found something good." And it was a 79 OPG hockey case.
And what was the temperature when you were there in Regina, Canada?
It reached negative 40 degrees. It was as cold can be.
But that's perfect. Something like this being discovered, it's the only known. You would want it to come out of middle of nowhere Canada. That just adds a lot to that backstory.
Right. And actually, you could back out the Gretzky case, and it's still going to be one of the most significant Canadian card finds that we've had recently. There was a 77 baseball OPG case, a 78 case, a 79 case. There were boxes and other cases from the late 70s into the early 80s for both baseball and hockey.
Wow, so there's 16 boxes within that case. It set the record, the auction record for sealed material. I was lucky enough to get to go to a baseball card exchange and watch Steve Hart and his team authenticate, which was absolutely thrilling. Some super nerdy stuff for sure, but a lot of excitement, a lot of fist pumping when they determined it was legitimate. All good stuff. We have a video of that experience you can watch on our website. But the big thing there is when you have a big sale like this, same as when we sold the SGC 9.5 mantle, afterwards we saw a nice increase across the board for all mantle cards. And you can expect that this is going to have a great effect, not just on open material, but on hockey cards. What other wax results in the auction did you guys see that really perked up your instincts?
Well, this was certainly the highlight for wax, but there were a lot of other notable unopened finds in this auction. So one piece that I know Joe was dying to take a look at was a 79 Topps cello box. We actually took 2 out of the house. This came from the collection of a former Topps employee, and the second one unfortunately was no good. The guy had opened up the cellophane and pulled the gum out of each one of them, and so one of them was no longer good to sell, but the other one was beautiful. It was wrapped, and it sold over the weekend as well, and I think that sold for close to $200,000.
Yeah, And you're talking about the 71 top
71.
seller. Anyway,
Yes.
yeah, that was, I think, by the way, thanks for reminding me of my crushing defeat. Just look, I talked to a lot of people about that box. It's the only one I've ever seen. And and wax is tough. 71 wax is a tough box. I've never seen an unopened cello box before, a complete box. So just a remarkable piece. And like Jason said, sold for about 200, and there were 63 Fleer football, a little over 200, I think 204, 66 tops, about 276. There were a number of them right around 100. The Batman cello box, I think 68 Series 1 football. There were a lot of really good prices. And Mike, you had mentioned earlier kind of the effect that these sales can have on the overall market. When I was at the Burbank show here just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to some guys that are really active in the unopened space. And between January, February Platinum, and some of the items we have coming up this spring, when you see these boxes selling for 100, 200, 300 or more per box, especially in the 60s, what we were talking about is what effect this can have, kind of the rising tides raise all ships, on kind of that next level down, which is you start to get into the 70s, 72, 73, 75 boxes, because the gap is starting to widen in terms of price. And so it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens. And one of the things I noticed, it's small, but it's a slight indication in this auction. We had a 75 top cello FASC box baseball. And when that box sort of peaked out kind of in the middle of COVID, it kind of topped out around 30. And this one sold for 29. It's kind of like inched up. There was another price recently in the last 6 months that was around 27, 28. So we might see that next level down take kind of a positive surge up, because again, that gap is becoming pretty significant, and most collectors can't play at that level. So really interesting results here in Platinum.
Yeah, and we were lucky to have a lot of wax in this auction that were the first that we'd ever seen of them, and we see a lot of material. And I expect, just like after the Mantle sale, just like after the Gretzky rookie sale for over $3 million, those next few weeks we saw tons of raw Mantle cards and raw Gretzky cards. People reaching out to us to find out if they also had $1 million item. Spoiler alert, they did not, but those are valuable cards. And I expect to see a lot of people reaching out to us that are digging in their collections, family collections, and find these unopened boxes. So feel free to reach out. If you're not involved in the unopened wax industry, it can be tough to know what's valuable and what isn't. But we do free appraisals on anything, so we can let you know what you're sitting on. And most importantly, don't open it until you talk to us. Now, we also had some great numbers for individual cards, some incredible sets that we were doing set breaks. Joe, what did you see from the results on that side of things?
Yeah, it was sort of another example, I think, throughout the auction when it comes to set building, and whether it's really low pop, high grade material or just iconic sets where people are having a hard time. Collectors are having a very difficult time finding this material raw. We could start with the 52 tops break. And by the way, it was a partial break. We have the remaining components of that set break here coming up in March, and then a few more in May. But some of these prices were just outrageous. Now, Robin Roberts was a great player, but $20,000 for an 8 on this card is unprecedented. It has never sold anywhere near that. And you can see with some of the more common names. Here's another great example. 12-6 for this example. It really, again, just shows that the desire for set building, that art has not gone away. People are still very much into building sets. But as we talked about on the live program Saturday night, it's getting harder and harder with vintage material to find gradable commons from going back into the 50s. But one thing we didn't talk about that I think is worth talking about on the show today is that look, I was at PSA for nearly 22 years, and just like in any business, when the business grows, prices go up. It's just natural part of business. Then we had that incredible time around COVID where PSA experienced this avalanche of submissions all at once. Then the prices went up again, and over the past 2 or 3 years, they've continued to go up slightly. So how does that affect set collectors? It makes you think twice. Like when you're finding, you're out at the National, you're trading with fellow collectors, and you find what you think are gradable commons. I mean, when the prices are nearing $20 a card, you have to think twice about that. So I think if you're an owner of sets or high grade commons right now, and I think this trend is going to continue, and the cards are already graded, I think if you're on the fence, considering consigning those types of things, the appetite for those cards across the board, we saw 59 Topps football, 61 Fleer basketball. The appetite is very, very strong right now. And I think, again, one of the things we hadn't talked about was kind of this dynamic with the pricing of grading and the difficulty in finding gradable commons. I mean, if you're looking to put together a set from, let's say, the mid 60s or even into the 70s at $15 to $20 a card, you have to think twice, because if you're not getting enough 9s or even an occasional 10, I mean, in some cases when you're getting a lot of 7s and 8s, I mean, the return just isn't there. So this is a dynamic that has changed quite a bit over the past few years. I mean, there was a time going back 15, 20 years ago where you could grade those cards for, $5 or $6 a piece. Well, those days are long gone, unfortunately. So because of that, what's happening kind of in the grading world, it's hard. It's becoming harder and harder to find, these high grade commons. So throughout the auction, there were just really, really strong results. 69 Topps baseball. I don't know if we could pull up some of those, but some of those prices, I think there was a Bill Mazeroski, who, again, technically isn't a common. He's a Hall of Famer. $27,000 for a 10. I think it goes without saying that that's a record price. But
yeah,
and then there were other 69 Topps cards. I mean, now this is a very rare variation, the no black line variation of this card. Again, though, that's an unprecedented price for that card. And someone who's looking to fill a high grade set, they want this variation. They're going to have to pay. Here's another great example. I mean, $12,000, Ralph Houck. So anyway, I'll stop there. But I think throughout our sale, it was really neat to see all of these different areas where set building, again, was alive and well.
Yeah, and it feels like a lot of people in that pandemic you talked about come back into the industry, and there's probably a lot of people who were building sets when they were kids or they were younger and let it go, quit doing it. And then as they get back into the hobby, it's a lot easier now to look for material, at least. Whether you can find it or not is another thing. But that set building genre may have grown a little bit in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, and again, even if you're able to find it, it's also about having the expertise to determine, what is going to achieve certain grades, at least within again, no one can predict the future or predict the grades with 100% accuracy, but just having the expertise to do it. Obviously, we have a great team here at Heritage that helps consigners with determining what things should be graded, what things are probably not appropriate for grading, but that's part of the service at our company. And I think our team does a wonderful job with that.
Yeah, we've got former graders on our staff who know what the grading companies are looking for. And on the front end, we can give you a good answer on what it will grade and what it will be worth. And I'm contractually obligated to say we have Derek Grader, the former head grader at SGC, on staff. I have to say that monthly. So that's one thing we really enjoy, though, is we get a lot of inquiries of raw cards and raw collections, and we're able to tell people what they can expect and then process the cards and grade only what should be graded, so we're not wasting the consignor's money or time on grading and submissions. We had a question there about the Andre the Giant signed photo. Thoughts on that? Giant was misspelled on the card, wondering if that added to the item from the error standpoint. And I can say the winning bidder of that posted on Twitter about it, and he was incredibly excited to win it. And he loved that it was misspelled. He thought that made it more unique. It is an interesting piece. Some of those wrestling items from that period, the production and editing quality was a little low, maybe looking to cut corners and just get the material out. And that's a great example. As somebody who proofs everything that goes out for Heritage, things can be missed at sometimes. So that does happen. But anything, where you can say when you're showing off your item, oh, here's this little unique feature, I think adds to it. And that's a good example. All right, guys, what else caught your eye in the auction?
Well, to continue the theme of set building, the 61 Fleer, there were a few cards there. And actually what's interesting is we got those cards graded ourselves at Heritage. This was a set that was built by hand from packs from Herky Rupp, who is the son of the famous basketball coach, Adolph Rupp. And this was, it was by far the most beautiful 61 set we've ever seen. And we had gotten several cards from this set graded, and I believe there were 3 10s that came about. George Lee was one of them, and at $25,000, it was, I'm sure, a record for any George Lee card. And then, there was an Elgin Baylor card as well that sold for over $60,000. As Joe was saying, it's incredible the amount of money that people are willing to spend on some of these cards, because you just can't find them. When they're pop 1, pop 2, pop 3, and you're thinking, how many people are putting together a 61 Fleer set? It's certainly more than 1 or 2 or 3 people. And if you're building that set and you want to have the best cards that are known, you're going to have to fight for this type of material. And so I think as long as you see prices like this, especially for commons, you're going to still see PSA getting flooded with submissions, because everyone loves to think that their George Lee card is going to be a PSA 10 or even a 9, I'm sure, is going to be boosted by some of these prices. And you're going to continue to see people running to SGC, PSA, to these grading companies. As long as you continue to have these top end prices, you're going to start to continue to see submissions.
And in the social media era, there's a lot more people who are showing off their collections, bragging about the items they have. And that set registry is one thing. I see a lot of people on social bragging about where theirs is, or purchasing a new card that's going to move them up that registry. And as you said, hard to find some of those low pops, even when they're commons. And we're seeing a lot of competition for them in the auction format.
Yeah.
Jason, I wanted to talk about uncut sheets. We've had a lot of great and unique uncut sheets in the last few months, and the one we sold this weekend is one of my favorites.
69 Topps basketball. That is probably the best uncut basketball sheet you could find, especially, at least for vintage. It has the entire set right there. It's absolutely gorgeous. It displays better than just about anything you could put on your wall. It's a work of art. This came from another former Topps employee. And I think what the general theme of this auction was, especially for cards, is if it's rare, if it's scarce, if it's something that doesn't come up very often, it performed very, very well. And it wasn't just uncut sheets, but those high grade commons, the high grade set registry stuff, vintage signed cards, wax. These are items that don't come up very often. Some of this is material that we've never seen before. Some of it is material that we might never see again. And so as long as these rare items keep on showing up, we're going to keep on seeing spectacular prices.
Yeah, and in the past couple of years, the prices for uncut sheets have really grown. I feel like that was a very niche collectible even just a few short years ago. And now we've had a lot coming out of the woodwork, even some from the 80s and 90s that have done very well. And I think there's just a lot more people getting those framed, hanging them up in their offices or their man caves. And that one is just incredible. We had some very large items that posted large prices, the 1888 tour poster, the Leroy Neiman painting, the 9-foot by 8-foot painting. Joe, do you think people's houses and walls are just getting bigger and that's what's accommodating?
I wish mine were big enough to put that Neiman painting up there. I do want to make just one quick last comment about the sheets. Jason won't remember this because he wasn't born yet. Unfortunately for me, I'm the old guy here. But back in the 80s, uncut sheets were really hot for a while. Like they were a really hot category inside the hobby. And then for whatever reason, there was this long stretch where they became very sort of niche and they weren't collected by the mainstream. But to Jason's point, what's so wonderful about that particular sheet is the whole thing is there. It's right there on display. It's not like it's one of several sheets. The whole thing is there on display. It's colorful. It's eye appealing. I mean, and that's such a big, eye appeal is plays such a big role in anything that people collect. It's sort of about time. It's been nice to see a resurgence in interest in uncut sheets because they really are great display pieces. I mean, let's face it, most people, although some do it, most people don't display their cards. They don't. There are some companies that make custom displays for graded cards and that sort of thing, but most people put their cards away in a safe box or somewhere else. This is one way to really enjoy different card issues, framing up uncut sheets. So I think it's great that it's enjoyed this resurgence because, again, at one time when the industry was just starting to boom, sheets were a real thing back in the 80s.
Yeah, so if you're sitting on uncut sheets, send us some images. We'll let you know what we have. There's ones that are new and haven't been out in a while, are doing very well. I know we've seen a few Garbage Pail Kid sheets that have done some crazy prices. So non-sports too, also a good area. All right, from Ron Hobbs, what would my 52 and 53 top sets sold by Heritage in January 2020 sell in today's market? No regrets. Money isn't everything. Great attitude. Joe, what would you say to that?
First of all, hi, Ron. We haven't talked in a while. Ron, I've known Ron for a really long time. A great guy, great collector, good friend. Yeah, I don't think I want to answer this question. Maybe ruin his day a little bit, but it's certainly higher. I mean, I tell you what, what's kind of amazing, because I remember Ron's 52 set was really, really nice. Back in the day, he was one of the early supporters of the set registry. Now that set that we just broke, the partial set that we just broke up, consider this. We still have, I'm trying to recall exactly how many were sold, but it was more than 50%, but I don't think it was, 80 or 90% of that set. That was missing Mantle, it was missing Jackie, and it was missing Matthews. Those are three pretty big cards, right? It's still, I think the total for just this partial 52 set was somewhere in the range of $650,000 just for a partial, without the big ones, without the real big names in there. It did have a Maze that sold for a little more than 150. It had a 7 Pafco that sold for, I think, just a hair under 20, and it had a Berra. But outside of that, it was mostly commons, and that tallied up to 650,000. So I'm sorry, Ron, if I've made your day worse by sharing that information, but yeah, the market is really changed on some of that stuff. And it is an opportunity for those that are, again, on the fence, thinking about if it's time to move on for something here or there. The market is right for this stuff. So again, hi, Ron, and sorry, Ron, at the same time.
Well, that's one thing I really like about our auctions, even the platinum auctions. Everybody loves to talk about the high 5-figure, 6-figure, and especially the 7-figure items. But there's plenty of items, even in these platinum auctions, for every level of collector, whatever you collect. And those set breaks is a great example that there's some 6-figure items at the top. We talked about a few of the 5-figure results, but there was plenty of items that sold for under $5,000. So to help out a collector at any level. So whatever level you collect at, you should reach out to us and we'll let you know what you have or help you find what you're looking for. Jason, I want to talk about those Joe Montana rookies. You post about it on social. Very interesting dynamic there.
Yes. So if you're unfamiliar, there were 2 Joe Montana rookies that we sold. They were actually back-to-back lots. One of them was this pristine 10 graded by BGS by Beckett, which sold for over $100,000, which is an incredible price for this card. And then there was another that was a PSA 10 that sold for a little over $40,000. And don't think the $40,000 suffered, because that was higher than the last 3 times a PSA 10 had sold. So I think that this will continue to be a trend where you see, well, we're seeing that Beckett prices have slipped a little bit, especially the Beckett 9.5s versus the PSA 10. Maybe about 5+ years ago, you would have a BGS 9.5 sell for almost similar to what a PSA 10 would sell for. Nowadays, there's a significant premium to that PSA 10, but there's still a premium for the Beckett 10 Pristine, and the Beckett Black Label is still the gold standard for grading right now, and that's going to be the highest value point for any graded card, at least for this modern, maybe 1970s and up material, because collectors, it's extremely low pop material. It's stuff that Beckett is very tough on. I know that Rick Probstein sent through, I think, what was it, a couple dozen Jordan rookies that were PSA 10s, hoping for one pristine 10 from Beckett, and he didn't get a single one. So, Beckett has gotten a lot fewer submissions since COVID. PSA has taken a significant market share in terms of the grading population. But as long as you still see these pristine 10s outperform PSA 10s to a 2-to-1 ratio in this instance, you're going to still see people sending material to Beckett. You're still going to see those Beckett loyalists still using Beckett in troves. And, it was an amazing result actually for both cards.
Indeed. And, good question here. John Samuel Atkinson. With the end of the Sports Illustrated, do you see a market for graded SIs in the future, or is there a hold and wait approach? Good question. I have been getting a lot of questions and inquiries about Sports Illustrated. Over the last couple years, those prices have exploded. I can remember when I started at Heritage, which, as you can see from my hair, was a long time ago. I mean, you're 18 here. If people came to us with wanting to consign Sports Illustrated, we weren't interested because there wasn't a price point for them. But now we've seen a few top 6 figures and several 5-figure prices for them. That was last year, and it kind of exploded. And a lot like tickets, it's kind of settled back down into some more reasonable and I think logical prices. But for the SI, it all depends on what issue it is and what grade it is. The Jordan ones are still doing excellent prices, not the 6-figure prices we saw maybe, but a lot more have come into the market, which is a big factor. But in this auction, we had about a dozen Jordan SIs of varying grades, and they all had very good results. I think like the ticket market, it went way high and then has kind of settled down. Joe, what do you think about the Sports Illustrated issue?
Yeah, I don't think there will be any sort of short-term major changes to the market. I think, as you've said, it kind of settled down after getting crazy hot for a while. But I do think somewhere down the line, like tickets, right? Most of us, when we go to a concert or a sports event, it's all digital now, right? So the printed ticket becomes nostalgia at some point. I think the same thing is possible with SIs. I think the further we get away from it, it becomes, remember the time when, you'd go, I mean, I could say this because of my age, SI was a big deal. You'd go to the supermarket or whatever, and the next SI and who's on the cover. It was a big deal for a long period of time. Maybe that nostalgia kicks in with more separation from kind of the end of the printed version. I don't think there'll be any major changes in the short term. Just an opinion there.
I think Sports Illustrated ending the publication is going to help a little bit. That it put it back in the news for sure. There was a ton of homages and remembering of people's favorite issues and issues they own. So I think over the next year, that'll kind of keep it relevant as far as the prices. We'll see. I mean, it's still, the prices now are way over what they were 8 to 10 years ago. So if you have were buying them back then, you have a great chance to get a good return now. And lastly, Jason, we've seen a real interest in signed vintage cards, and we had some great examples in this auction. Why don't you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, there were several great examples. I think the top signed vintage card we had in the sale was a 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle card. What was interesting about this was it had a period signature, maybe not rookie period, but probably early mid 50s. The signature certainly added a lot of value, but one of the reasons why it did so well was the eye appeal of the card itself. It was well centered. The card was graded 2.5, but it was a very attractive 2.5. And just like everything else in this discussion, rarity is performing extraordinarily well. And this is a card that it's a top end example of a signed Mickey Mantle rookie. It's blue ballpoint pen, which a lot of collectors prefer. It has a signature from his playing days. It's a well centered card. It's an attractive looking card. It's if you're putting money into a signed Mantle rookie or a signed Mantle card, this is just one of the best items you could put your money into. This is really a top line example.
Yeah, and we had some nice vintage examples throughout the auction. We had a couple collections, and we've got some more coming up. So if you are interested in that, we've got some good ones coming your way.
And this is something, by the way, where signed cards used to be taboo. You know, if you brought your card to a show and you spent $100 to get Mickey Mantle to sign it, sometimes, you know, someone's eyebrows would raise, oh, why are you ruining your card? You know, I would send out cards through the mail to players all the time, and I collect signed cards myself. But this is something where there is a rarity factor to it. I mean, Mickey Mantle signed everything under the sun, but when it comes to cards, there really aren't as many signed cards, especially top line cards like 51 Bowman, 52 Tops, some of these rookie cards, some of the high grade cards. There really aren't as many of them as the market is asking for right now. So it's one of those things where if you have these collections, some of these people are in it for next to nothing because these cards there wasn't such a premium for them back 10, 20 years ago. And so, as Joe was saying, if you're on the fence and you're seeing some of these prices, it is worth reaching out to us because some of these signed cards, especially, it doesn't even have to be the Mickey Mantles of the world. There's players that people are collecting complete sets of 52 Tops, 51 Bowman, 52 Bowman, 55 Bowman's a popular one, where they're trying to build an entirely signed set. And some of these cards that you've never heard of have a lot of value.
And especially those players who passed before the 80s, you know, those real show booms, there is just a handful of examples of their signed cards. Joe, what do you think about the current market for autographed vintage cards?
Yeah, that has been a really interesting sort of trajectory, you know, that we've witnessed over the past several years. I mean, I remember back in my PSA days when we made the decision to start, because when PSA first started, they would not slab signed cards, and we made the decision to go into that market, and that was, you know, 20 or so years ago. So to watch that take off has been amazing. I think Jason brings up a great point. There are signed cards and then there are period signed cards, and they're almost treated like two different things. And I think as collectors become more educated, more discerning, I would imagine that premiums for period signed cards are going to continue to kind of move at a higher sort of pace than stuff like on the 51 Bowman Mantle. I think most experienced collectors would prefer to have the one we just sold versus his classic post-career, you know, black Sharpie signature, which is still cool. But if you're going to choose between the two, this is the preferred one. So I think and unfortunately there hasn't been a in terms of third-party certification, there hasn't really been labeling that goes along with that. You know, it's all treated kind of the same because it is an opinion, but clearly when we sell it, we do mention those types of things, whether it's period, whether it's post-career, that sort of thing, because in some cases it's very easy to tell just by the style of someone's signature. I mean, we did sell, if I recall correctly, I think it was this fall, a really terrific 61 Fleer Wilt Chamberlain rookie card that sold for a record price. That was just beautiful. And so I think, yeah, that to watch this market completely change, especially as it relates to rookie cards, I think it's a little overdue because of, as Jason says, the rarity versus unsigned of the same exact item. So again, very cool to see that this market change over time.
And people are always asking us, what's next? What's the next big thing? How do I get ahead of the curve? I'll say on that note, we've seen a good number of baseball signed cards and basketball, but not too many of football, boxing, golf, hockey, some of those other sports. So if you have signed vintage cards from those sports and you're someone who's looking to get ahead of the trends, there's a possibility there just because we haven't seen many. Not many have come out, and the signed card market is moving in the right direction. So great talk, guys. Good time to note to everyone, our consignment deadline for our May auction is coming up in just a couple weeks. And of course, we have an auction every month. We have weekly auctions that open every Sunday night and run for 2 weeks, all different levels for all consigners and bidders. But as we've said, we do free appraisals on anything. So if you want to reach out and find out what your collectibles are worth, we're happy to tell you. And then, of course, if you want them presented the way only Heritage can, we can help you with that as well. Joe, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
joe@ha.com is my direct email.
You want to give out the cell or no?
Hey, why not? No, I don't know. I don't know. It could be scary stuff. So
You might get some good nickname recommendations.
Right. Yeah, that's all I need for today. That's all I need.
Jason, how do the people get a hold of you?
jsimons@ha.com. You can also reach out to me on Instagram. It's jason@heritage.
And I'm Mike P@ha.com, and I run the Heritage Sports social media accounts. So you can also message me there and I will be in touch with you. Looking forward to talking to you all and seeing you guys at shows. Until then, happy collecting.
Take care, guys. Good to see you.